Good evening, everyone, and welcome to tonight's monthly Renaissance Center chat. My name is Jordan Anderson, and I am your guest host for tonight, filling in for Dr. Carla Debnam. And I just want to say thank you for the opportunity to sit in your seat tonight as the guest host. Even though I'm usually on the backside. So in 2020, Lady Carla began the monthly RC chat, and she has not missed a beat since. So we want to certainly salute her tonight and give her her flowers for her diligence in creating this space for the much needed conversations to heal and enlighten our community. Tonight, we are going to be talking about and discussing Black history and healing through the arts. So I am not alone tonight. Dr. Jewel Debnam, who is our resident historian, as well as Ms. Janaea Stanley, are here tonight. Jewel, would you go ahead and introduce yourself?
Hi, everyone. I'm Jewel Debnam. I am, as Jordan said, a historian. My research focuses on the 20th century African American experience, labor, working class, women, and gender. So I'm happy to be here to talk about that and the arts, which are two things I'm really a big fan of.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Janaea Stanley, and I am a licensed clinical social worker. And I am so excited to be here to talk about mental health and how we can heal ourselves through the arts.
Awesome. So we're just going to go ahead and just jump right on in it tonight. So the theme for this year's Association for the Study of African American Life and Histories, Black History Month, is African Americans in the arts, with a focus on art as a platform for social justice. So with that being African American art being infused with African, Caribbean, and Black American lived experiences, in the fields of visual and performing arts, literature, fashion, folklore, language, film, music, architecture, culinary, and other forms of culture expression. The African American influence has been paramount. So tonight, let's go ahead and discuss how African Americans have expressed themselves in these various art forms over the years. Jewel?
Oh, wow. In so many ways, right? So art, I think, has been critical to the Black experience from the moment we arrived in what became the United States, and it has been since then, and to the present, tools to find comfort in, a tool to use to find safety and self-expression, and even a way to communicate with one another. So I think. The ways in which sort of enslaved people even sort of use straw to weave baskets and like sort of the Gullah, like South Carolina, Sea Island areas, or use songs like what become the spirituals, et cetera, I think remain really important to how we identify and understand ourselves. And of course, as time and technology progressed, the art transformed. And of course, as new arrivals, both during the period of slavery, but then with the mass arrival of Caribbean and African immigrants during the 20th century, there's been sort of a constant infusion of new Black ideas to sort of the Black American experience and things that we might not even know where they come from, right? Specifically, that we find in our music and art dress as a form of art, which also is something enslaved people use to express themselves. I think just sort of there's endless amounts of things we could point to as being a result of African American contribution to the arts. And most recently, even with people like Beyonce, for instance, attempt to reclaim country or other genres that were traditional spaces for Black artists. I think maybe younger people will be able to trace and understand our history even better by exploring genres we may not even usually, currently at least, listen to. At least in where we are in the country, maybe in like the South, Black people listen to more country than we do, or sort of the Southwest, I would say. That's the short answer.
Awesome. You can feel free to give a long answer if you want to. I feel like you have to condense yourself because this is the space where we can talk about this. So,
yeah. I think in the Asala like primer they gave on Black History Month, they did a good job of talking about the sort of different changes as we sort of progress through time. And once, like I said, technology becomes more available to everyone, so recorded music, television, film, et cetera, is sort of an explosion, especially in what we can know about presently because we have record of it. Things like the spirituals, the versions that we know today may be really far away from what enslaved people actually were singing, given how spirituals become like a commercial product during the Reconstruction period. But sort of jazz, all of the important genres in the United States, I have some credit to African Americans. And outside of music, then of course, dance, the visual arts, and sort of moments of great cultural rebirth, like the Black Renaissance or the New Negro Renaissance in the 20s and 30s, and then on and on. I would say also another important era would be the Black arts movement during the 60s and 70s as a moment of another revival. And then probably again in the 90s, depending on the genre. So I think a lot in music genres. I teach music history classes. So that's like how my mind moves when we're talking about arts in particular. But of course, the other mediums are just as influential. But I think music especially is a place that we have made our mark in this country, and it left an imprint that like is global at this point.
Yep. And long lasting. So, wherever you want to go, whether it be the library, I think about the Apple Music or Spotify, just those digital places now that is being converted. So you can have it at the access, of your thumbs. So, Janaea, did you want to add anything?
I'm not sure if there's anything I can add. As when you were talking about Beyonce, I was thinking about Andre 3000 and his new instrumental album, and how he is, just taking the world by storm by doing something completely different than anybody's ever known him for. But I think that's a great example of artistic expression.
Jewel, when you first mentioned about the dating back to the slavery and the corn weaving, I thought about how for many years during those times, our ancestors and the slaves during those times used hairstyles, or they created maps in their hair. So I think about how this day and age, hairstyles are amazing and through the roof, but those began, during that time.
Yeah, and then the hairstyles as maps, songs as tools to sort of guide people to freedom, or just communicate other things that could have been perceived as entertainment to enslavers or sort of people on the sidelines, but people in the community understood what was happening. So I think that's like still in music presently, even if people aren't trying to necessarily send a message. You play the same song for different audiences, and you might get something out of it that I might get something you don't get, or one of my students wouldn't get because they don't have the same lived experience as the person who's making the music.
Right. So we know that art can help in every area of our lives. How has art been I think we kind of talked about it just a little bit, but how has art been used to bring about emotional healing, especially in the intergenerational trauma?
Art has been used in so many ways, a variety of ways, as we mentioned earlier, just with, spoken word or visual arts or performing arts. We've used art in so many different expressions, as you were talking about hairstyles, just to be able to express our thoughts, express our feelings, being able to address certain challenges that we have that we may not be able to find words for, and we may use music or drawing or dance or anything to be able to express how we're feeling.
Jewel, do you mind defining intergenerational trauma from a historic perspective?
I guess I would start with an example of intergenerational trauma, sort of, and I know this might be not my field, right? If we're talking about sort of like post-slavery trauma, et cetera, that some scholars have explored. But I would just sort of say, I think of it as the impact of whatever sort of a generation has experienced and how that is sort of then mapped on to how their children are raised, and how those people sort of move through the world. It's not necessarily a term I would really use, but I would sort of in my work. But the idea of sort of the things that happened to, let's say, the people who were fighting in World War I and how then they proceeded following that, and how it impacted African American children growing up in the 1920s or 30s or something like that. It's just sort of what you learn and how you pass it down. And for African Americans, unfortunately, in this country, a lot of our experience has been traumatic, whether that was slavery and then sort of generations of slavery, right? It's not like slavery happened. There were generations of enslaved people. So families who were enslaved for generations, and then those same families then were sharecropping maybe for generations. And so I think of it as sort of the impact sort of economically, socially, politically, not solely sort of in the body and in the mind, which is outside of my area. But I think there are ways to sort of see the impact of various sort of major moments, but even sort of things that are just happening in families, right, could cause intergenerational trauma, even if it's not like a community-wide issue. So for me, I just think of it as sort of like understanding sort of generational differences, and the impact of sort of a particular context on the adults and then on the children. But I'm sure Janaea has a better psychological definition.
I don't know about all that. I think you were spot on. Intergenerational, between, among generations, grandparents, parents, children, and trauma is basically simply defined as a significant imprint, something that has significantly impacted a particular person or a particular generation. And one of the things that I really try to incorporate significantly in my work is being able to understand how historical events have impacted us through generation that has impacted us in our present circumstances. And so hopefully that's a simple definition that everyone can understand, but it's basically things that have happened, as Dr. Debnam said, through generations that have left a significant imprint or impacted us, where they could be positively or negatively. But most of the time when we talk about trauma, it's referring to something that's negative.
Yeah, and even just from my perspective, as a social worker, I think about even the pandemic. We've been talking about this for some time now, and though we keep on saying it, and I think some people are starting to realize the effects that the pandemic has had on us as this new generation, or the generation that's here in the present now. And so as we continue to grow older, we will continue to see the impacts that is having on us. And I think about thinking about the arts, relating it to the arts. I saw this TikTok the other day, and someone said they were acting out in the future. They're going to be researching how people were during the pandemic, but we were doing TikTok dances the whole time. So I think about that from the perspective of arts. I think that a lot of people really turned to social media to express themselves during that time. I mean, we were in the house. We didn't really have much to do during that time, but to be creative, come up with skits and share it with our friends. So any thoughts on that?
I agree with you completely. The pandemic affected all of us, even those who, our parents and grandparents, they've lived through things that we never experienced. So it may not have emotionally hit them the way it hit us. They've lived through things that we would have never been able to get through. But it affected all of us, just like we were talking about earlier with an intergenerational trauma. It affected all of us, and it doesn't always affect us the same way, but it significantly impacted each of us.
Mm-hmm.
I think about sort of the impact, especially on, I think it's right, Gen Z and Generation Alpha, right? The younger, the school age and younger than that, children who missed time in school. And I think we are just beginning to see really what that means substantively for their cognitive and social development. As an educator, you're encountering people who may not be where you would expect them to be because they lost a whole year or more of in-person instruction. And so that is trauma, right? That they don't even really know don't really have an idea of the consequence of that. They live through it, maybe they appear as if nothing happened to them presently. But there are some real significant impacts that I think we've yet to see with regard to their ability to be out in the world as thoughtful humans.
Absolutely. I agree with you completely.
And I just want to remind our viewers tonight, if you have any questions, please place them in the chats on YouTube or Facebook, whichever platform that you are watching from. So as we continue our conversation tonight, emotional health and social justice are hot topics in our culture. Can you both give some examples where they both may have been addressed, and by what artists, visual, dance, acting, singing, or any other media?
I think that just something that's just off the top of my head, the movie The Color Purple has brought on a lot of issues that are very relevant, when it comes to sexism and racism and just relationships between husband and wife and men and women and children and parents, just the dynamics that so many have encountered. And they used music and art and costuming and dance to be able to express these very difficult topics, being able to find a way to heal or expressions of healing through those different forms. So that's one thing that just came to mind was the movie The Color Purple.
This is it's not really a throwback, but it's also not that recent. The first thing I thought of when I heard the question was Solange's A Seat at the Table, Solange's album, A Seat at the Table. Crayons in the Sky, this song is still it really hits. It's still a perfect song and a perfect, in my opinion, encapsulation of just sort of maybe being dissatisfied for whatever reason, that sort of life is not what you expected it to be in the ways you're coping, or maybe not the healthiest ways. Even healthy coping might turn into something unhealthy. So that album, I think, is I don't know that she meant it to be. There are some more direct songs about just social justice issues on the album, but I think the moment it came out, it was the perfect moment for music like that. I would say and that was 5-6 years ago. something. Like, it was before the pandemic. So all those years have like meshed into one for me, but I know it's before the pandemic. But I would say that I think more recently it's been harder for me to find music that's really speaking to the moment, music in particular, right? The Color Purple just came out, but right, that musical and the music isn't like new music. It's from the beginning of this century, the music at least, and then the book, of course, is well before that. And I don't know that everyone is equipped to make music or art, like rigorous, well thought out art for the moment. I don't know if that is what people who are churning out TikTok anthems are like going for art. They're going for a sort of viral. And I think that there's space. I would like people to sort of engage more directly and speak to the moment. But I don't know if there's an appetite for that, or does the art dictate the appetite for the art? I don't know. But that's the last thing that I can really think of is like music wise. There are books and lots of other things that I think are more like on the nose for the last 5 or 6 years. But I don't know. That's my long answer and my dissatisfaction with the state of music in 2024. But
I think a lot of podcasters, athletes, musicians, actresses, actors, various celebrities, I think they're using podcasting and just being able to verbally express how they feel has been a really, really interesting movement, so to speak. It may not necessarily be traditional art forms, but being able to verbally articulate how you feel about a particular topic, or, whether it's politics or religion or whatever it may be, a lot of celebrities or a lot of athletes, things like those types of individuals are using podcasting to be able to, and social media, to be able to express how they feel about various social justice topics and emotional welfare and, things like that.
I will say I enjoy sort of visual art, painting, drawing, photography. And I do think there are a lot of people who are working in those spaces that are expressing and reflecting the moment. The BMA last year had a really good exhibit on hip hop. They have good exhibits regularly, but a really good exhibit on hip hop. But I'm thinking of artists like Jordan Castell, Amy Sherrill, Kendi Wally, all these sort of visual artists who are, I think, speaking to the moment. Devin Allen, who is from Baltimore, is a photographer. I think there are a lot of people who are being heard and seen and like uplifted by major museums and galleries that I think is really important to mention, because we don't always talk about that. But I'm a big fan of museums, which is probably not surprising as a historian, but I'm a big fan of art museums in particular. So I wanted to add that.
For me, I think about when I'm hearing you two talk, and also in relation to the question, I think about local artists, or not even like artists who claim that they're artists, but express themselves because they are trying to make a point. I think about the Black Lives Matter, the yellow painting down in DC that said Black Lives Matter. That was art. And that came from a form of expression of, listen, we're tired of y'all killing our people. We're tired of y'all, trying to suppress us. Black Lives Matter. So I think of that. I also think about the Freddie Gray, the mural. So several murals, but the Freddie Gray mural down, I think it's on Fulton, comes to mind of expression of people who are tired, of the abuse of Black people, so they're taking a stand. Are they proclaimed artists, maybe not, but I think about the local talent that we have, even just within Baltimore, that are taking a claim and standing up to say, hey, this is not going to happen. We don't want this to happen anymore. But it's done in such a beautiful, artistic way. So what recommendations of music, art, books, movies, or experiences would you share with persons for healing?
I am a proud alumni of YouTube University. And so I think that YouTube has a wide array of various videos, various individuals who have ways that we can express ourselves, whether it's through visual art or through music, or, whether you're creating your own playlist. I don't have anybody specifically that I can think of, but just tapping into those various art forms or various platforms that we do have ready access to, that, we don't have to pay for, that we're able to access the things that can help us with our healing, whether it's meditations, whether it's instrumental music, whether it's guided meditations or physical movement. There are just so many different things out there online that we can tap into, that we can use to help us in our personal healing journey.
When you mentioned, I was thinking about meditation when you mentioned the Andre 3000, the new album. It's like a perfect, if you meditate, it's wonderful. Like a perfect meditation album. I'm a big book person. And you mentioned sort of accessibility and sort of having free access, right? Let's not forget we have libraries, everybody.
Yes.
And you can use your library card even to get ebooks, audio books, etc. I actually brought some books that I think that I know have been helpful for me. If we're thinking about sort of ways to sort of reframe or reconsider our sort of space in society. So I'm gonna do like some show and tell, if that is okay. I have this book by Trisha. Oh, I don't know if we can see it. Rest is Resistance.
Put it in front of your face.
Can we see it? I think so.
Kind of.
I feel like the angle was good. There we go. Rest is Resistance by Trisha Hersey, which is about what it says, that we all need to lay down and not be so sort of caught up in grinding. Take a break, a breath. The second book I have is called Black Liturgies. It just came out last month by Cole Arthur Riley. If you're on Instagram, I would also recommend following her page, Black Liturgies. I know we Morning Stars Baptist Church, and we don't practice the liturgical tradition a lot, but this is a book of liturgies that, like, if you've been to AME churches or sort of more Methodist churches, you've probably heard of a liturgy, that are sort of centered in the Black Christian experience to a degree, for all types of moments. So I would encourage you all to, even if you aren't going to go check out the book, to go on her Instagram and read her words. She uplifts Black artists all the time. Just this past Sunday was the birthday of Toni Morrison and Audre Lorde, who are both Black ancestors. And she focused on their art. And there are poems in here, liturgies, like all types of things. I think it's great. And then the last book, the first two are written by Black people, but this third one I think speaks to our experience in a different way. And I know it's Lent. And it's a devotional, Bread for the Resistance, which the subtitle is 40 Devotions for Justice People. And I've done this devotional before. I think just sort of understanding that we can also find liberation and justice for the world through our religious practice, and that we shouldn't see those things as separate. So those are three things I would mention. And then I highly recommend just going and seeing art, right? Speaking to the accessibility, lots of museums in this area especially are free. All the Smithsonian's are free. The Baltimore Museum of Art, et cetera. Everything doesn't have to be sort of high cost to be sort of uplifting or valuable. So I always recommend going and sort of seeing how people are expressing themselves, because you never know what will speak to you. So those are 3 books. But go to the library, y'all. All of these, I don't know, I say it, people laugh, but like,
You're so right. You are so right.
I'm so serious though, because I have an extensive book collection, but I also go to the library a lot. It's probably like the best public service we have, to be honest.
Highly untapped resource. You're absolutely right.
Yeah, and they have like all types of things. You can read all types of resources.
Music too.
Yeah, music, movies. You can stream.
Yeah.
Access to newspaper archives, all types of things. And we have really great libraries in this area that we should take advantage of. Your tax dollars go to them, so you already paid for it.
Awesome. Janaea, did you have any others?
Not that I can think of. Dr. Debnam hit it right on the head.
Mm-hmm. And there was a question from the audience, and I feel like you would be very great with answering this question. I mean, both of you. But do you have different art projects for different ages going through grief?
Sure. Depending on the age of the young person, will depend on the type of activity. A lot of times using certain coloring books, there are grief coloring books out there. There are different workbooks that young people can use to learn about grief and be able to express themselves through grief. There are different crafting activities that young people can do, whether they are creating pillows or taking a picture of their loved one and being able to imprint that on a t-shirt or a pillow, or, there are just a lot of resources out there and activities out there that different age groups can complete when they're grieving.
Awesome. So that's all the questions that I have for tonight. I'm not sure if there are any other questions that any viewers may have in the chat, but we'll give another minute or so for them to put any questions in the chat. But before we do go, I wanted to ask a question on knowing yourself and knowing thyself in this space and in this season of Black History Month. What tips can you all give for people to kind of be in touch with themselves, not just in a space of overcoming grief or overcoming trauma, but just getting in touch with their purpose, getting in touch with their ancestral roots during this time?
I think one of the biggest things that we can do is just being able to slow down for a moment, being able to notice our heartbeat, notice our thoughts, notice what our bodies might be experiencing. We are always in a fast pace, moving so fast. We have families to take care of and work to do at our jobs and bills to pay. And so being able to just slow ourselves down, being able to quiet our minds, which is easier said than done, but using those instrumental music, being able to use sleep sounds or nature sounds to be able to just to quiet ourselves down. So that way we can take an inventory of ourselves and what's going on with us. That way we can address those things. Our bodies are our alarm systems, right? When we have a headache, we know there's something wrong. When we have a knee ache or elbow ache, we know that there's something wrong. And so our mental health is not as, we don't pay attention as much to it. But when we start feeling fatigued or when we start, our mood starts changing, maybe we're a little bit more agitated or, a little withdrawn, those are our warning signs that something's going on and that we need to take inventory of ourselves to find out what's going on and what we need to do to address whatever that issue may be.
I would add, I guess from my perspective, one way to know yourself is to know who your family is. And if you're fortunate to still have elders alive, to just ask them questions about their lives, because you never know what they've experienced. And sometimes people aren't like sharing without being prompted to. I've recently started to interview my parents about their life histories, like their as individuals. And even though they've been my parents for decades at this point, I didn't know everything that they shared with me in those interviews. And it's not for anything beyond just my personal use to know about them. And so I think that's a way to know yourself, is to know where you come from. And it doesn't only have to mean you're reading like a book about Black history. It could just mean asking people around you what their lives were like, or even exploring in our local area historic Black sites. Lots of really influential African Americans are from Maryland. And we don't always sort of know about them or know enough about them. And some of them, fortunately, have museums and houses named for them. There's also a really great resource right in Baltimore, right? The Reginald F. Lewis Museum. And they have like a current exhibit that includes quilts. Anyway, which is another sort of art form. But I think that's also something to do. We know that sort of learning about Black history has come under fire to a degree in education. And I think it's our time. We need to sort of reclaim that space as a church, a Black church, sort of universal, but also as people who are parenting children, that like you should not be relying on your schools to do that. So you need to educate yourselves so you can educate your children, especially if what they're going to learn in school is not reliable. So that's my like 2 cents. Ask the people around you about their lives, and then reclaim sort of your history and your power to share it, and don't rely on sort of other people to do that, especially if you really want your children to know who they are, because that's your job. It's not the school's primary, like initially. So that's my 2 cents on that.
And I appreciate that, because as you were talking, we had a question come in that asked, can you make suggestions to help families begin to dialogue about Black history? So I think you gave several suggestions, and some, what I hear is people have to not, and I don't want to be wrong in saying this, but people can't be so lazy and just sitting back and letting things watch out and complain about how things are happening. You have to take initiative and be a part of the narrative.
It's our history, right? And our history is always counter to the dominant narrative of what has happened in the United States. So why would we rely on them to teach that to us? I like my first encounters with Black history were at my house, where I grew up. I was fortunate enough to go to New Somers Christian School, which was mostly Black for pre-K through 5th grade. And so I learned it at school, I learned it at home, I learned it at church. Before I entered into predominantly white educational spaces, I was very sure of myself and who I was. That I know is a privilege in many ways, but I learned it at home. My father had me reading history books over the summer. And there are lots of great children's books. Vashti Harrison is a great illustrator. She actually graduated the same year as I did from UVA. And she has a great series of books that are appropriate for small children. I think some of this also has to happen sort of in the analog world, and that there might not be a good YouTube for kids. Maybe no Gracie's Corner on Black history, I don't really know. But you might need to like actually read the book, right? Or give them coloring books, take them to these museums. I wouldn't recommend taking them to like the Smithsonian if they're 3 or something like that. But like there are age appropriate, just like there are age appropriate tools for children to express their grief through art, there are age appropriate school tools to teach your children. You don't have to give them the nitty gritty, really dark history when they're very young. But it's available. There are so many books. And there's so many great sort of conversations you can have with children about history that don't require you to sort of shock them or scar them, because all of our history isn't traumatic and terrible, right? There are a lot of bright spots, and that's probably the place to start if you are looking for smaller children. For like
just to add to that, for our little ones, oral history is a great way to begin our little ones starting to be inquisitive about what's going on. You know, if they're holding a cup, or you know, they're like, well, who made this? Let's find out who made this, or you know, just different ways to, because our little ones are very inquisitive. So being able to encourage that and being able to challenge them to look up things and being able to do their research for themselves. So, you know, hopefully that can help, and being able to offer them, you know, they love to learn about their own history. How were you born? What happened when you were born? How much did you weigh? You know, those types of things. They love those types of stories. So that could be something to get our little ones interested in history, being able to learn about their own history, and then being able to expound on that.
And also, as you're talking, I'm thinking about how can, for those who, I think about youth and young adults and even little children as well, who may have already been a little bit shocked by the traumatic side of history, what are some ways that they can overcome, I guess, that feeling of immediate sadness or feeling traumatized by, I guess, secondhand traumatized?
Yeah. You know, just being able to talk about how we've persevered. So, you know, we know about the horrific things. We know about that stuff, but we also have a very long, resilient history, you know, the kings and queens and, you know, all of those types of positive things that we can talk about, just how, you know, these things may have happened, but look at how we've overcome. Look at all of the things that we've accomplished. And there's a long list of those types of things. So, you know, being able to counteract that. And I wanted to go back to one of the things that you all mentioned earlier about, you know, being more proactive in our families. You know, we're so busy, you know, it's really, really hard to be able to do the things that we want to do because we are so tied up doing the things that we have to do. And so, you know, sometimes we just have to start small, and, you know, maybe we're not able to take our kids to the museum, but maybe we can, you know, look up, there are lots of kid friendly, especially with African-American lead characters on Netflix and, you know, different things like that, those types of stories that we're able to, you know, learn about our history. And, you know, we can tap into the resources that we currently have available to us.
I would say,
go ahead.
I was just going to say, this goes back to my point about the libraries. If things are cost prohibitive, this is like a perfect moment to go check out all the books for kids at the library, because they have endless amounts. And I know kids age out of books very quickly, or can. And it might grab their attention for the 3-week loan period or whatever, however long it can keep a book, and then get new ones. And they have, like I said, ebooks, all the things. If your kids are reading on their iPads, you can use the library apps to do that too. So I would encourage you to look into that, because every time I go to the library, like there's some mother with 15 books she's checking out or bringing back. They even have toys at some libraries. It's amazing.
And that's also what I was getting ready to say. Also, in addition to like the self-serve type of things that you can do at the library or museums, they also have group activities that you can do. So whether it be signing up for family history time or the session that they have where families come together, different families come together and learn about history with the children. There are many opportunities available. And even if they may not be available at your local library, express interest in that. The librarians, they love to know what the community wants to learn about, wants to know about, so they can put on those types of events. They want for you to keep on coming back. So I would express that to them.
And it may even be a good opportunity for families to get together themselves, outside of birthdays, which are great. I think that's one thing. I know my family, we're always trying to find other ways of being able to get together. We spend too many times only being able to get together on funerals and things like that. But just being able to, have a Black History celebration, or, being able to go through the family history. So who's your mom? Who's your grandmother? Who's your grandfather? Things like that. And, that's something we can do right in-house.
Absolutely. There was a question from one of the viewers, or some of the viewers, for Dr. Jewel, if you can repeat the names of the books. They are on the scroll below, but if you can read them again.
So the books are Rest is Resistance, a Manifesto by Tricia Hersey, Hersey. Black Liturgies, Prayers, Poems, and Meditations for Staying Human by Cole Arthur Riley. And the devotional was called Bread for the Resistance, 40 Devotions for Justice People by Donna Barber, who is Black. I double checked. So all of our books are by Black women.
Awesome. We also have a question from a viewer. How can an adult who is currently dealing with discrimination on their job not project those feelings upon their kids when they ask why they are being treated differently?
That is a great question. I don't know that there's one definitive answer. I think that as adults, we need adult outlets, being able to talk to our other adults about the things that we're experiencing, so that way we can learn how to interact with our children. Sometimes, our little people are triggering to us, because of the questions that they ask, or, the constant nature of them asking questions can be very triggering or very challenging. And so, seeking out other adults that you can talk to about the things that you're going through. And as far as not taking it out on your children, being able to, self-regulate yourself, being able to take time out, mommy needs a minute, daddy needs a minute, I'll be back in a few minutes, doing some breathing exercises or counting, or, maybe even coloring, whatever activity that you can do to center yourself and calm yourself. Maybe you want to journal, write out how you're feeling, so that you can express those thoughts without projecting them onto your children.
I would say to the last part about the why are we treated differently part, I would try to think of it depending on the age, right? And older children could deal with the answer better, right, than younger children. I would sort of then wonder why what they are experiencing that makes them feel like they're being treated differently. That's like what I would ask, and then go from there. Are they sort of feeling what you're feeling, or is this something that they are experiencing themselves? And then that might be something to explore depending on where they're experiencing that, whether or not it's happening at school, or some other place. So that's where I would start. If they are like a teen, I think you can speak candidly with teens about they should, to some degree, already be aware of the history of African Americans in the United States. And even maybe like an older elementary or middle school students. Oh, they're 6 and 9. Okay, so the 9-year-old might be able to take, I'm not like, this is not my field, but I assume that they might be better equipped to handle more of the truth relative to the 6-year-old, but I wouldn't give them too much unless they are experiencing it directly that
And
would
it
be.
depends on the maturity level of the 6 and 9-year-old, because not all 6 and 9-year-olds are,
Yes.
you know, immature or mature, so it just depends on their temperament, and the parent is the best person to be able to determine the temperament of the child. But, ask them to ask questions, get them to ask questions, or, you ask questions of them to say, you know, are you being treated differently? Do you feel as though, do you feel uncomfortable? Are you being made to feel uncomfortable? Are you made to feel like you're different than other people? Those types of things. And get the conversation started that way from their perspective to kind of see where they are and what they understand. And then you may be able to interject, your feedback from there.
Absolutely. And I was even thinking that to me makes me think about the intergenerational trauma that we were talking about. And so making sure that as parents, that you're not projecting on your child. And not to say the wrong thing to do, but we want to make sure that we are shifting the narrative. So many times we can be labeled as the angry Black woman or the angry Black man, just in how you were brought up in reacting to situations. So what Janaea said about being able to ask questions, that opens the door for a calm conversation, and also continuing to listen to your child through that and not immediately becoming, reactive to, oh my gosh, somebody is mistreating my child. You have to be able to be calm in that manner, talking them through that. And even I think about hold on one second.
And parenting takes a lot of patience, a lot of self-work. As adults, we don't understand ourselves, right? We don't know how to raise children, right? It's not a book. It's not something that, we just know how to do. Every child is different. Every child's personality is different. And so, being able to, again, as the adult, taking responsibility for your own feelings, your own actions, your own behaviors, so that you don't negatively impact your children. Being able to seek out, and I'm glad that these questions are being asked, because it is important. How do I do this so that I don't take this out on my children? Again, taking a beat, taking a deep breath, counting, being able to identify what's going on with you so that you don't in turn, project it onto your children.
Yep. And also the services that the Renaissance Center provides, not only the services, the therapeutic services that the Renaissance Center provides, but the groups that Morningstar Baptist Church provides, whether it be the Family Matters Ministry, the youth ministry, young adults, women's, men's, being able to find a safe space for you to be able to express yourself, and also have like-minded people to be able to talk through. You don't have to hold in those things, nor make your child feel like they're the only ones that have to have that you have to have that conversation with. So being able to really set yourself up in a space where you can be heard and talk through it with.
And I know a lot of the young women and men that I work with, one of the things that I constantly hear from them is being able to find a healthy support system, right? Because it might not be in their home, it may not be their peers. And so being able to seek out like-minded individuals who are able to help you through positively, being able to give you good sound advice. And sometimes that takes vulnerability. It takes, being brave to be able to seek out someone, being able to seek out services or seeking out mentors or, someone you can get sound advice from. So it's definitely important for us, as we were talking about earlier, just being proactive in our healing. We can't expect someone to wave a magic wand and all of our problems go away. We have to really be proactive in how we're going to change our lives for the better. And, there's so many brave individuals that I've worked with for years now who are taking responsibility for their own healing. So it's possible. We just have to take the first step. And, you might not find someone right away, but that's where the patience comes in, being able to continue to seek out until you find what you need.
Absolutely. And so just as a reminder, you all can contact the Renaissance Center at 410-409-0025. So if you need therapeutic services, or even someone who may need therapeutic services, provide them the Renaissance Center contact information. Have a consultation, see if they accept your insurance, or if there are free services that may be offered during that time, so that way you can, or even just resources available, so that way you can be connected for your next healing. Well, I thank Ms. Janaya Stanley and Dr. Jewel Debnam for joining us tonight on the Renaissance Center chat. We appreciate your wisdom that you have given us on the topic for tonight. So thank you all for joining us, and we'll see you next month. Well, the viewers, we'll see you next month. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you.